Hello, everybody, and welcome to ShowX today on the, what is this, July 26th, 2020. Already, how is it going, everybody? As a heads up off top of the show today, we are going to be getting into it a little bit with the concept of review bombing, especially as it applies to reviews of video games. But I'd like to start everybody off with a quick, hey, how's it going? Ken, Todd, good to have you both on the show again this week. How you doing? Ken, what's up?
Hey, good to be here. Thank you again for hosting everything, sir. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Todd, yourself, how's it going, sir?
Hi, I'm good. What's going on, Mr. Wayne?
Hey, not much. We are chilling, having another good start to a week, another hopefully good day for everybody's out there as we continue to deal with all the randomness in people's lives and hopefully people finding a little bit more return to normalcy and things like that. I do want to top the show, and maybe I'll get into it again later, let you guys know about an opportunity based on today's things and stuff going on that we here at VtWProductions.com, we here on ShowX, along with the gaming group, and if you're part of kind of the Facebook guild and all that kind of stuff that we do on social media about VTW gaming, VTW nerdery, all these little subsections we have a bunch of people playing around with. I have put together on popular request with our company that has done the jerseys in the past for VTW, and have put together some options with our latest gaming logo, the big happy yellow face, some potential face masks if people would like to order some so that you can, while physically distancing and properly protecting those around you, still show your gaming pride as being part of the whole Versus the World gaming network. If you would like to jump in on the opportunity, I am putting a link into the chat notes right now that you can go to the Google Doc and basically sign up for any one of the designs that's in there for a face mask. Know that they will not get ordered until we have at least 20 of any one of the individual designs to be created by the company. But if you want them, and if you'd like to jump in, go ahead and jump on the order list there. I think each one's basically going to be $7 plus shipping. And because they're so small, my idea of shipping is literally putting them in an envelope, postmarking them, and sending them. So hopefully shipping is less than $1 for anyone locally, at least. I'm not sure how it'll be overseas, but I'll figure that out as well. But I'm happy to try to ship to anywhere in the world. So jump on that. If you'd like to show off your VTW gaming pride, please jump in and do that. All right, with that out of the way, and before we get to the main topic today, Ken, what have you been up to this week? What's been going on with you?
Hey, nothing's been exciting with me personally. But I'm actually living a pseudo bachelor lifestyle today and for the next 2 weeks
How is that not
because my
exciting?
wife has got off. Yeah. So
Gaming,
in
gaming.
pretty much right.
You're so
Um,
awesome, Wayne. Thing to say to a husband when his wife is out of town. Because
it's not
the first place I went is a prostitute to someone who will love you no matter who you are or what you look like.
I mean, he already has two
So,
warm bodies to lay with, even when Kitten's gone. And so I think he's comfortable.
Yeah, both the pups. Yeah.
that's
So my wife is we've been very careful with COVID, right? My wife's got uh, 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 her immune system isn't the best. We'll just say that. And due to past history with not mental health, with medical history, I don't think your mental health can really affect your immune system. And so, the idea of us traveling right now is a bit insane. But if you take extreme precautions, you can quite easily travel in a car, right? So what happened is my sister-in-law came to visit yesterday. She's been in isolation for like 2 months. She didn't even stop to get gas on the way here. She drove over across the states to get here. She got here. We hung out for a day. And then her and my wife have gone off to somewhere else in the States to go for a couple of weeks to an empty home that nobody has lived in for a long while. And they're not going to talk to anybody else or see anybody else. And so they're completely isolated, right? It's as safe as can be, really. I mean, technically speaking, I suppose, like, as they're driving down the highway, somebody might spit in their window or something, I guess. I mean, like there is some extreme, but again, that's as likely as somebody spitting in our apartment window, right? I think it's as safe as you can be. So, like, I don't mind. when I first heard of this potential thing coming up, I was like, well, you can't take a flight or anything. That'd be far too dangerous. No, I don't know. We'll be driving, and they discussed how they taken a lot of precautions to be able to hang out during COVID. And I think so long as extreme precautions are being taken, you're following the advice produced by the CDC and not the Trump administration. You're you're pretty much safe, right? So. And that's exciting for them. They get to hang out and they get to see each other the first time in over a year, actually. And I get to hang out by myself for a couple of weeks. So I've got a big glass of plum wine because I'm a crazy bachelor pseudo lifestyle here. I'm going to go to bed early tonight because nobody can stop me, and I'm going to play too many video games. That's
wow, you wild and crazy guy going to bed early.
I know, and I pushed one of my work projects to GitHub a little bit early today instead of working on it tomorrow because I felt like it because I could. Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Nice.
My wife's not home. I know. I'll work.
Well, yeah, I'll work without feeling guilty.
You are fantastic, Ken.
See, girls, girls, get yourself a man like Ken.
Work ethic we all should aspire to. The inner Midwestern in me just started to glow. Bioluminesce.
Oh, that is a way I could
one of us.
The spare room. Oh, it's exciting. Yeah, I'm pretty boring. But I'm excited for it, and it means I'll be available for more games. So you guys want to play anything whatsoever, just shoot me a message on Steam. I'll be online a bunch. I'm still working, right? So I'm still more or less 9 to 5. So other than that, in the evenings, I'm mostly free. Shoot me a message. I'm up for whatever. But that's what I've been up to. What have you been up to, Todd? What have you been doing?
Well, I'm still murdering Mongols in the nastiest ways imaginable.
In a video game, right?
Yeah, Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, okay. All right, okay.
Yeah, still killing Mongols. No, not killing Mongols in real life. I am not a Chinese Communist Party member, unfortunately. Because
that's officially banned in China. Shoot.
That's right. We may get banned on Twitch now too. You
never
know.
Yeah.
You never know. I said something insensitive. Damn it. Anyway. I was somewhat concerned because the reviews for the game that were less than stellar talked about the combat being samey.
I read that too.
I was a little bit worried that they showed you all this cool stuff in Act 1 and that the combat was not going to really evolve after you unlocked all the stances and stuff like that. Well, never fear, because the guys at Sucker Punch came up with this freaking awesome thing that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it is amazing. And it fits the theme perfectly, and all I'll say is severed head.
Ooh.
Severed heads.
Oh, okay.
That's the only name of the day. Severed heads. Beautiful. Loved it. Fantastic. The other thing that I've been doing is I have been reattempting my Orthodox Ottomans playthrough in Europa Universalis 4. So I did it the first time on the new patch, and I got to about 1715. The game ends in 1821, for those that don't know, and I came to the realization that I was going to be pretty close to reforming the Roman Empire, but I didn't think I could get there. So I tried it again, and tried to be a little bit more aggressive in Europe earlier, and taking advantage of the Deus Vult, Cassius Belli.
Oh, yep. You mentioned this last time.
Yeah. And I think I'm gonna get there.
Cool.
So it's good. Everybody from essentially the lowlands to Moscow is really, really mad at me at this point because I've just been taking territory. Like I sacked Rome for the first time. Earlier today. So I have some aggressive expansion to manage. But if I manage to navigate that okay, I think I'm going to get there with plenty of time to spare to have fun as a Roman, starting as an Ottoman and bringing the Orthodox faith to Western Europe.
Cool. Do you think this has actually aided your like learning of real history as well?
That's the thing, right? Being in Europe and being able to visit all the great European cities, like having that at my fingertips now, rather than it being a cross the ocean type of affair. Yeah, I mean, like we spent. I think I talked about this last week too. I spent 3 days in Rome on a company culture excursion, right? And one day was classical Rome. The second day was Renaissance Rome, and the third day was Enlightenment Rome. And so it was all very themed. I got to see the inside of the Sistine Chapel.
Were you playing this at the same time as well when you were there?
Like, yeah,
at the same time. You already...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I had already bought the game. I had been playing it. So yeah, I mean, it's put cities on my list to visit that I never would have thought of. Like, I want to go to Istanbul.
Oh, nice.
And cool. I have, for when I travel to Istanbul, it's not Constantinople. Now Istanbul, not Constantinople. No, it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Because I will probably call it Constantinople by accident.
Gotcha.
It's like, it's great to be here in I mean,
ooh.
So like, yeah, it's you know, I also started watching. I started watching the extra credits channel, but not for the video game stuff because I know things about video games. I instead started watching it for the history stuff because I don't know that much about history. So from the perspective of if you don't know something, extra credits is your ticket. Yeah, so it's yeah, it's all sort of how do I want to say built on itself in an upward spiral rather than a downward spiral. So I'm more interested in European history because I play the game, and being interested in European history has made me want to play the game more in unique and funny ways. So it's all...
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
I think that the way that history is taught in schools is often the way that maths is taught, which is like, here's a bunch of facts you need to learn. You'll never understand the why or the really get the experience behind it. Like when you think of history, you just think of a bunch of old facts, when the wars were, how many people died, stuff like that. That's what, at least that was for me in school. But when you actually talk to somebody who's truly passionate about history, you learn, you learn so much, and it's so damn fascinating to hear that kind of stuff. And when it's presented in art form, like a video game as well, you also get to see, oh wait, this was a real thing that really happened. This isn't just some obscure bunch of facts. This was a real, genuine thing. And I think it's great that you can experience history in a form that makes you interested and makes you enjoy visiting the places more as well. That's awesome, dude.
Oh yeah, it's been, I mean, and again, I know I mentioned this on shows past, but coming from the perspective of somebody whose history is less than 300 years old and standing in an 800-year-old Templar church in France and just going, wow, this is 2.5 times older than my whole country.
Yep. Yeah.
And just,
what?
Looking at it, and it's very, very difficult at times to express the awe or the reverence for the history that one feels when you just walking into a place like that.
Yeah. So, no, it's an experience that's very unique to the Americas, I think, and the people who are from the USA in particular. I think it's because there's such a heavy focus in the USA on national history that the idea of international history is quite fascinating. Yeah.
Yep. Totally agree. All right, Wayne, your turn. What did you do this week?
So I can't say I've been all that like amazingly out and doing a bunch of fun stuff, as you will. I had, played some games here and there where I was focused on kind of bouncing between Call of Duty, some Warzone, which I've been enjoying a lot, as well as my normal ARAMs, things like that. I also have spent some more time in Overwatch recently because there's a gal from work and one of my friends, Hydro, that I have chatted with at work about gaming to kind of pass some of the time as we were talking about things, and it reinvigorated the idea that, oh yeah, there are actual some Battle.net games I don't hate that I already own, and so maybe we should play some more of those, and playing with some people that were willing to actually make time to help teach and make me better. And so I've been spending some time in Overwatch. And anecdotally, it was interesting because Lemon Laser, as she was here this morning, asked to check out playing Overwatch on the PC versus where she plays ranked on Switch, to kind of see how it felt and what was like differently. And it was really entertaining to watch her go from Switch console controller to keyboard mouse and having to adapt to that. But dang, if I wasn't impressed with how quickly she started picking it up. But there are also some nuances because that difference of precision, right? Where she was used to, like, she jumped on Widowmaker and tried to do some sniping. And
that auto aim, man. Yeah.
Well, so her not having that was like, whoa. And just in general, the tweak, like how quickly moving around, she was like, this is not the same. I was like, yeah. Plus, I have it on my, even though I have this huge monitor, right? I played in kind of a widescreen-esque setup. I forget the actual resolution, but whatever it is, that 21:9 kind of resolution setup.
Yeah.
And so it's much bigger. And even then, because I'm running a 1080, I've got the graphics on full. So she was commenting on just like, wow, this looks a lot prettier than mine.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And
so you just
this experience.
I have to say, Wayne, you just said plays ranked Overwatch on Switch.
Yes.
And the first thing that came to my mind was a one-legged professional wrestler.
Well, to put it in some context, her overall reaction after playing several matches in quick play and stuff and various, like, I think 4v4, 3v3 modes that she was playing, she came back saying, wow, this is harder than I expected. And her comment to that wasn't the control scheme, wasn't the play. It was that she said, players on PC are playing way more like they know how to play the game than they do on Switch. Yep. In that they're actually flanking and keeping together as a team and doing all the smart things that she usually can take advantage of against Switch players. And so she did take a moment like, these people are all much higher skilled than what I normally run into. I was like, yeah, and I'm nothing skilled in this game.
I can speak to that like a lot because when I originally started playing Fortnite, I first played on PlayStation and then I moved to PC, and there wasn't that big a difference to us between the two. Then I went to mobile, right? I got on my phone and I was like, oh, it's crazy that it's on mobile. That's just a weird thought. I'm going to try this out. And so I downloaded it and I attached it to my PlayStation controller, so it felt the same to me. There was no real difference. Just I was on a different screen. And the graphics were fine. I've got a good phone, so it was no problem. And suddenly I went from, a guy who maybe gets 1 or 2 kills before dying to now being a guy who was getting like 15, 20 kills before dying. Because I'm guessing most people on mobile just play with touchscreen, right? And they rely on auto aim. I had auto aim and the controller now. So suddenly I had this like advanced control scheme. And I was just wrecking people. I was like building huge towers and then sniping. And, I imagine I was making them all mad. So the controller schemes are they as you said, one-legged wrestler, right? It's when you give them the second leg, you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I just that was the first thing that came to mind was like, or somebody who was trying to fight Mike Tyson when Tyson was off his meds. Which, by the way, if you want a scary and hilarious at the same time YouTube video search, Mike Tyson best knockouts.
Ooh, those are some great ones. I actually brought that up on the show a little while back because I had rediscovered, as Tyson has been training for his exhibition fight he's doing against, who is he's doing against? Lewis or something? I forget who he's doing it against this fall, or like a couple months or something like that.
Lewis?
Well, I'm trying to remember who it's against. I'll look it up here because Tyson is bringing.
I can't say this enough. Like, people will talk about Floyd Mayweather being awesome and Manny Pacquiao being awesome and all these fighters throughout the ages. Mike Tyson, when he's not on his meds, is the best boxer on the planet ever. he would kill people, metaphorically speaking,
yeah.
less than 3 minutes.
So it's with Roy Jones Jr. in September.
Oh.
So Tyson at 54 to face Jones Jr. 51 in 8-round exhibition match. And both of them, if you look up their videos they've been putting on things like TikTok and Twitter and stuff like that of their training, I am more excited for this upcoming fight than I have been for almost anyone that's currently like in the prime of their life boxing right now, because they both look phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if Tyson goes off of his meds for this fight, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Hey, speaking of fights, I'm sorry to deviate even more, but do you guys know who Mauro Ranallo is?
I do not.
No idea.
He's the guy that does play-by-play for. He did UFC play-by-play. He's done boxing play-by-play in the past. He was also the main play-by-play for WWE SmackDown for a little while, and then JBL bullied him out of the company because JBL's an a-hole. But WWE brought him back, and he is the main play-by-play guy for NXT.
Okay.
And he's awesome. He's not quite Jim Ross. He's not quite Joey Styles, but he's right up there. And that's another one. If you like really, really good play-by-play guys, being an old radio man, I love a good play-by-play guy. And in fact, I used to listen to, when I was in Denver, I used to listen to the KOA radio broadcast, even if I was watching the game on TV.
You listen at the same time.
I hate the TV play-by-play guys. Can't stand them. But I'll listen to Dave Logan call a Broncos game. Anytime. So anyway, Mauro Ranallo is definitely one of the people you want to just, again, it's a YouTube search. You can look up Mauro Ranallo, great calls or whatever. You'll get some interviews with him. He's got a fantastic combat sports play-by-play voice.
Nice.
So he's definitely worth looking up and doing a search on. Anyway, love that guy.
I'm not big on pretty much any sports at all, but I've got some close buddies back home. Like my group that I would hang out with, I was the only one who didn't like wrestling, so I've heard a lot about over the years, and and you know, so this kind of stuff's good for me to pass on as well. So I appreciate you telling me, so I can tell them, I heard something about wrestling.
Right.
Fair.
That's right.
No, that's awesome. The other.
I'm sorry, Wayne. One more thing. Mighty Stoner just said in the chat, he's never seen Mike Tyson fight. You must.
Yeah, dude, YouTube it. It's one of those things that even if you don't like boxing, you should see him fight.
Yes.
It's a different energy from almost.
I will not stop what I'm doing to watch boxing, but I'll spend 25, 30 minutes on YouTube watching Mike Tyson devastate people.
Yeah, no, you can look up almost any one of his old fight videos or just him punching. And arguably, and this has been from discussions from martial arts groups I've been a part of and things for years, where analyzing his just physical capability and even seeing him today, because one of the things that first brought it to my attention of him getting back into it was him having just a conversation with other boxers. And you saw him do that like hype thing you tend to do if it's some sport or something you were into. He's like having the discussion about strategy or something. And he kind of got into it a bit. And he was like, no, like throw the punch like you're doing, I'll tell you. And all of a sudden he just was behind the other guy with a punch lined up on his head. And this is another professional boxer who had just stopped and was like, oh, snap. Like at 54 years old, he is still that scary. And so, yes.
How did you get behind me kind of thing?
I mean, to another boxer whose eyes kind of did that wide-eyed, like, you got me? And you got to respect someone like that. But if you go watch any of those YouTube videos, you're going to see such power delivered in ways that you may not even know it's coming until you see like the slow-mo, because he was Lightning Mike Tyson, right? That he will deliver it in such a way, and if you really pay attention, every one of his punches comes from the feet like any good boxer, but his ability to slip a punch and then come right back in with a full body uppercut or something with so much power in it was unbelievable. And even by today boxer standards.
I shouldn't say all a lot of his early knockouts are uppercuts. He didn't work the left hook, which is kind of what made him really famous. Is the left hook that he learned how to throw later on in his career. But yeah, his early uppercuts are just yikes.
Yeah, devastating. Like, I was saying today, I would not want to. I actually threw the question out there, and you can probably, Todd, I'll throw this towards you since Ken won't have the reference. But it was who would you rather take a punch from today or at that same age kind of thing? And it was Mike Tyson or, oh gosh, not Evander. What was the big guy, bald dude that like famously fought till he was like
George
50?
Foreman?
Yeah, Foreman. Because Foreman's notorious for having just a brick of a punch. Like he's slow, would take a ton
in their prime, like when they were champion in their prime.
Let alone today, kind of thing. But yes, like,
I'll take a bullet.
Wow,
because both of them have so much power. It like
both of them are going to result in the same thing: me on the ground with my eyes closed in a heap.
Yes.
It's Foreman, I guess.
I was trying to figure it out.
The reason why I say that, if Mike Tyson hits you with an uppercut and he misses, like, you could die. If you get a left hook from Foreman, he's the worst thing he's gonna do is break a jaw or an orbital.
Yeah,
that's right. It's all a very scary conversation.
Ionis in the chat says, "Can I get punched by Vince McMahon instead?"
Right, even I know who that is.
All right. Yeah. So before we get to the main topic here, the last few things I was just gonna throw out there that I've been doing kind of recently is I've been surprisingly locked on to catching and finishing some shows, both in the combination of like on side screen while I was working on other projects and stuff like that. But I just finished, and I will say these because all of these are ones on a list of I've enjoyed and would watch again. The second season that came out of The Order on Netflix. I finally caught up to everything on Netflix for The Good Place, and I've enjoyed both of those series and finished them out. And I watched the Netflix movie Old Guard that has Charlize Theron on it as the main lead on it. And I've enjoyed them all. And I will say, I saw an article or something mentioned at one point about, thank goodness for whoever it was that advised Charlize to get into action star status later in life, because she's doing well. And it just, she's doing the action scenes. It's coming off great. None of it feels like she doesn't fit. And so I want to throw a bit of a slash salute kind of thing to her acting at the age she is and killing it with some fun content. And then the last one is I've had a new, like I've already tasted a little bit, but more recently I've gotten into it further with getting hooked on series that are like the long reality-ish series from various things. Some people already know, and I've talked about before, Terrace House, which is the Japanese, 6 people living together in like good ages kind of thing, which is normally what you'd see in other countries as being like a Big Brother or something, but it's Japanese, so it doesn't have the overt like drama. But it's great because in lieu of that, and with the other show I'll mention up, the subtlety of interactions, drama, and emotions and stuff have been so great for me and refreshing compared to kind of the normal Western style for if we're going to do a reality show, we have to have craziness. This one's more the subtle, like,
if you're not shouting, you're not expressing yourself.
So that and the show, and I've just gotten into it, The Great British Baking Show. And
yes.
The subtlety in both of them for the way like the judges / hosts and stuff or participants react, where Paul will come over to someone baking, look, say, "Oh, so you chose to do what for that? Oh, I'm going to do this and this." It's like, and he just kind of does like a, huh. And that subtle, like, just not even saying like that's complete garbage or good luck. It's just him going like, huh, okay. Right there tells like, Paul's like, "No, what did you just do?" And I'm just saying that in general, consuming media like that from a reality perspective that isn't overtly crazy right now, amongst other things I do, has been just a refreshing kind of experience that I'm really enjoying.
So our TV, whenever we close like an app, like YouTube or Netflix or whatever, right? It automatically defaults to like one of the 3 free channels that we actually get through just the TV, right?
Okay.
And I don't even know what the channel is. It's some crappy reality TV one. In fact, it is called this. It's 16 and Pregnant. Is that the name of the channel?
Mm.
Not just the. It's not just
Oh
the name of the show. That's actually the name of
God.
the channel. Now I think.
That's how much content they've
Um,
done on that now? Jeez.
yeah, it's disgusting. I've never seen so much glorification of something that is actually illegal, like literally genuinely legal in this country and most places. And also it's a glorification of like the oh, you're going to be free now. You're free. You get to go off and be pregnant and have a kid and oh my god.
That's not freedom. That's indentured servitude.
/r/child free. There's my home.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I have to say 2 things. Wayne, do you remember the old Japanese Iron Chef?
Oh yeah, the original amazing one.
Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
holding and
Iron
taking,
Chef.
because what was it? He took the bite out of the onion. Was it as his
Yes.
signature to start the thing or
Yes.
whatever in the promo? That of shows that were appropriated by others.
Chairman Kago was.
Oh, that show was amazing. I loved
That
the
show
original.
was so good.
I've seen a lot of references to it in popular like media, but I've never actually seen it.
It was amazing, as
and-
well as the chefs they had were so phenomenal in their expertise.
Yep, absolutely. It was English dubbed, which was good and bad. It's good because I actually have to watch it because my parents won't watch anything subtitled,
Ah,
and bad because we didn't get to hear the original voices from the people. And then one more thing before we get into the main topic. If you had to cast an action film today
Mhm.
and you could only pick one heroine for that film, ready? Scarlett Johansson, Charlize Theron, Mila Jovovich. You can only have one.
Sam again.
ScarJo,
Okay,
Charlize Theron, and Mila Jovovich.
gotcha. Okay. I will say that really easy for me. I would not do Mila. As much as I've appreciated a lot of the movies she's been in, I don't really feel her as projecting the acting portion of it. I think she's been cast in some good roles and things I've enjoyed, but haven't really relied heavily on her acting. Back and forth between Scarlett, Jo, and Charisse, because I've enjoyed things all of them have been in. But based on just that idea of an action heroine, I would probably go with Charisse.
Okay.
Ken?
So I had to Google them because I don't know. I'm very bad with anything culture. So I looked at them and I recognize their faces and I know who they are now. I wouldn't go with Scarlett Johansson, who I didn't know, because she's just typecast for me personally entirely into Avengers now. Even though I've seen her in a bunch of other stuff beforehand, now she's just pure Avengers. So no, I don't think she can be safely cast and stuff like that. I would have to go with Charlize Theron because I think she's just I've not seen her in anything action actually, and I would I guess it'd be I guess I'd be interested to see her in something action.
Okay. I guess I'm the lone ScarJo vote, and I think I go ScarJo, but I could be convinced. Like I'm not like really tied to that choice.
Yeah.
I guess the Mila Jovovich comparison is a little too late because the action films really for Mila would be Michelle Rodriguez, I think. Like I think
okay,
that's
so
the
admittedly,
comparison. If you had to cast an action film, would you pick Mila Jovovich or Michelle Rodriguez?
that's still a challenge for me because Rodriguez, I again like a lot of the characters and stuff she's done.
Such a badass.
And that's the thing, she is no question like hardcore. It's whether I feel like she can carry a movie as the lead.
That's fair.
Because I'm trying to think of anything she's done that's that category. She's usually, because I go all the way back to, we put Mila and Rodriguez in the same movie, right? Resident Evil.
The original Resident Evil, yeah.
Which I forgot until watching it again more recently. That was like, oh crud, that is Rodriguez.
She's
awesome.
That too? Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so seeing, I was like, that's right, she was in this, and she's always badass, but she's almost always a character who's somewhat on the side, mostly quiet, has a few moments of like a hard line, and then fights.
Yes.
But I've
No,
never
that's
felt the
a good point.
emotion out of her, like actual
Good point.
legitimate. She's selling me on the character. So
Okay, so amongst three people that will never ever cast a movie, 2 votes for Charlize Theron and 1 for Scarlett Johansson, but a very tentative
well, I will tell
vote
you
for
from the
Scarjo.
chat, I'm seeing way more Scarlett Joes than anyone else.
Huh.
Well, she's probably more proven herself in most people's eyes. I think like she's
Well,
just a
like I
very
said,
well known
once you
actress who's
mention,
quite versatile.
once you brought up Avengers, right? She, if nothing else, has the obvious in front of your face. Like, you know, she's Black Widow. And I will tell you, I am looking forward to the new Black Widow movie. Like a
Oh yeah, me too.
lot. You know, really looking forward to that.
You know what, the one thing I will say about that, it is released about 6 years too late. It should have been a film in 2015 or 2016. It should not be a film that gets put in after that storyline is done.
That is one of the challenges, right? And you can see some of where we can arguably say Disney is milking the IP. Oh, look what came out hot and everybody's excited for. Well, let's make a movie on that one. Yeah. So yeah, but at the same time, I'm excited for what I'm seeing and who's in it and kind of the story they're telling. I think it will be fun. And, you know, I'm not going to look for it for any kind of Shakespearean representation of acting, but for a fun, over the top effects and in that world movie, I think it'll be great. And controversy. And I think it'll be better as a female lead than we got out of Captain Marvel by far.
Yeah.
I enjoyed her, Captain Marvel. I thought she was good.
She's Brie Larson. She's involved in some unfortunate, had nothing to do with the movie, online shenanigans.
Aside from all of that, I was just specifically the movie. I just felt like she didn't sell to me the character in a lot of those roles, and there were some just like I didn't feel emotion from her in that character. And maybe that was the point, and maybe she acted it to a T, and I just missed that. And I separately from a Disney perspective, I felt like it was the most shoehorned movie. As you're talking about, does the Black Widow movie make sense coming after the timeline has done what it did? Captain Marvel felt so much like we already had this written out, but hey, let's make this. Let's take a shoehorn and just hey, look, we'll put some past on, you know, some of these characters and we'll just throw it into a timeline we haven't done yet with the early 90s and kind of like go, right? And I was
I don't think anybody can disagree that every film that is produced in Hollywood these days is a cash grab, and you can say that especially doubles this over anything that comes from Disney, right? So yeah,
but you can also say, but
never have been a cash grab.
But I could say that at least for the main storyline of the Avengers, I can arguably say that they had those somewhat planned out after Iron Man proved success. That they then said, "Oh, we can do this," and they created a solid timeline. And they had it all the way back. If you look at the original discussions of their movies they had planned, they did most of them and in the order they had planned. And then they had a handful of movies suddenly become added because of the popularity of a certain character that came out. But that's what I was saying. For me, it felt like Captain Marvel came out of nowhere and wasn't part of their original, like, here's our plan for how all these characters will lead up to the Infinity Gauntlet and such.
So I was just going to ask if you thought that they made that movie so that when the symbol shows up at the end of Endgame, I don't even know if I'm talking about these things in the right order, to be honest. But when Nick Fury disintegrates, spoiler alert, and he hits the buttons on the communicator and that symbol pops up, I had no idea what that was.
Gotcha.
Like, there were people in the audience who knew what that was, but I didn't.
For the symbol,
do you think they made the Captain Marvel movie specifically to go, yeah, this is what we meant by that? Like, we're gonna connect all the dots for you, type of thing.
I'm not sure, because at the same time, remember they teased at, I forget the end of which movie, I think it was Guardians 2 or something. They teased Adam Warlock with the golden casket. Yeah, the golden casket at the end where the group's like, well, we'll get our revenge kind of thing. Wherever that was. And we have not seen him yet, right? He's going to be in the next phase, hopefully still, because he's such a great character. And it makes me annoyed because he ties directly into the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones, because they ended up with the Infinity Watch and all the, high-end celestial type characters that had to then be stewards of all the gems afterwards. But they broke that too, because they basically said that Thanos destroyed the Infinity Gems with his last big hit, or in some way, so you don't need the Infinity Watch. So do you still need Adam Warlock, or is he now just going to be an antagonist for Captain Marvel in the future? And I'm not sure. It's right.
we will find out.
All right. Awesome. No, I appreciate those conversations, those kind of thoughts, because those are ones I haven't put together. But I think we should, before we get to a break here, let's go ahead and get ready to jump into our main topic of today, which is going to be the discussion essentially about review bombing and what that means and how it's applied and everything when it comes to video gaming. So, Todd, if you would help us understand what review bombing is.
Sure. So, from Wikipedia, a review bomb is an internet phenomenon in which large groups of people leave negative user reviews online for a published work, most commonly a video game or theatrical film, in an attempt to harm sales or popularity of a product, particularly to draw attention to an issue with the product or its vendor. While a review bomb may be the result of of consumers criticizing the poor quality of a product, yada yada yada.
It's interesting that we have a specific name for this, because I think it could also safely just be called reviewing, right? I mean, I know it's a kind of, gathered intention and the deep effect, right?
Ken, on paper, I agree with you. On paper. So, some examples of video games that have been review bombed: Spore, Titan Souls, Skyrim, Nier Automata.
Nier Automata.
Nier Automata, yeah.
Yeah. GTA 5, Crusader Kings 2, Firewatch, PUBG, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Total War Rome 2.
So from the ones you're mentioning, could you give us an example of the impact, essentially, of what a review bomb did to any one of those titles or something in general?
Skyrim was crap, right? No, nobody bought that after that.
Yeah. So, Skyrim. Elder Scrolls V Skyrim was review bombed in 2015 by customers after the game's introduction of paid mods, leading Valve to reverse their decision to remove the paid mod functionality. Additional review bombs for Skyrim, as well as other Bethesda games like Fallout 4, occurred following the launch of the Bethesda Softworks Creation Club in 2017, which reintroduced the potential for paid mods. So in this case, what we see is a review bomb being used for mass as a form of mass consumer protest.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I don't see that as a bad thing at all.
So I conditionally agree.
Okay.
And the reason why I say conditionally is if review bombs were covered in that way as mass consumer protests, if a review bomb was covered as a mass consumer protest, then I would totally agree with you. Again, on paper. Unfortunately, a lot of times the narrative becomes political. And so I'll read from 2020. The Last of Us Part 2 was review bombed on Metacritic upon release in June 2020 with a low score of 3.5, based on almost 30,000 reviews within 2 days, despite the game receiving, quote, universal acclaim from critics. Publications attributed the negative reactions to initially stemming from the leaks of the game's plot in April 2020, which had caused backlash from fans of the original game. User reviews were negative towards the story and characters, additionally citing the inclusions of SJW content, in quotes, and monotonous gameplay.
Okay. So it can be used by political factions who are
Well,
alt-right.
so
regardless of the
again,
group.
that's the narrative. We don't know because all of these things are done anonymously on the internet via handles, right? So if you really wanted to sift through and do investigative journalism on this, you would have to sift through 30,000 negative reviews, figure out the ones that would be politically motivated, find that user's tag, figure out who that person was, find their tags everywhere else, and then find out what kind of person they were. Right?
Yeah.
As we
It's super
talked
easy to do it
about
with one
last
person,
week,
but 30,000.
yeah, as we talked about last week, I don't think The Last of Us 2 mechanically is very good. Right?
Yes.
Leave the story out of it. So I don't know that it was review bombed for political reasons. I think that the representation was included to get enthusiast media journalists to write nice things about it. I think the representation element is the reason why it's going to win awards come fall/winter time. But I don't know that the backlash against it is based on the fact that representation is in the game. Like I don't think you can I don't think you can say that without doing the investigation necessary. Like
I think
I
the
really like
complexity of
the
the situation comes from the fact that you can have everybody be right. I mean, you can have alt-right people review bombing it. You can also have people like yourself, Todd, who go on and say, who buy the game and then they say, I found the mechanics to be very poor and I didn't enjoy the first 2 hours of the game, so I stopped playing or whatever. And that's a completely fair review to give any game, regardless of any other elements in it, right?
But Ken, the thing I'm hearing that makes me understand kind of the challenge or why this is a subject to be aware of, right, is that what Todd's kind of showcasing is that while, yes, what you're saying, Ken, about there being legitimate reviews from somebody who has played it and is giving you their opinion based on some specific aspect of the game and their experience with it, what it sounds like from review bombing is a whole lot of people in general jumping on to some kind of trend to push some narrative, be it, actual negative or positive reviews of something, but it not being their own personal interaction with that game or with that subject, right? That they're doing it because they caught, and an example being, and using Last of Us 2, right, as one that I did see some of the effect in Fallout 4, as to answer specifically Shadow Vice in the chat saying that he thought that it was a huge hit. It was one of the more divisive titles that I've seen recently, in that a lot of people were turned off from the idea of the game and plotline, as Todd said with some of the leaks, about the relationship status of the main character and stuff like that, and how some of that's portrayed in the game, as well as some of the other characters included in it, that for whatever reason, there were people who didn't like that, whatever reason they may have. And instead of them doing what a lot of people will do with a game and just not buy the game they don't like or don't want to, felt some need to additionally go in there and jump on that commenting, that narrative that said, this is a terrible game, such that they just didn't want the game to succeed, even though maybe it just wasn't a game made for them. And that activism or that aspect of doing a review bomb is one of the potential huge risks that people should be aware of. And I'm saying that just to help categorize maybe what's going on and where I see a big threat from it, although I can't say necessarily what to do about and such like that. But just the idea that you may get a game get blasted, and I've seen it happen with various games, like you said, with Skyrim, for once they added the paid DLC for like horse armor, visually, and things like that, that in some cases were people reacting in a way of saying, don't do that. This has been so good for these reasons, and we really dislike that choice. They're doing the same thing, but my weirdness is, I guess, I think it's just disingenuous of anybody to retweet, to share memes, to do something with any idea out there that isn't their own personal idea. Like, it's one thing if someone frames it in something that you retweet or share on social media or something like that, or in a review shares that someone else wrote in a way that's more elegant than you. But if you don't take the time to also add your own personal idea around that, I think you're a problem. If you're just sharing something
I
because
disagree with
it's
that. I disagree with that. If I find an idea online, be about any topic, it doesn't have to be games, right? Just any topic, and I decided this is an idea worth sharing, something interesting, like something that's, for example, some things I share is pro BLM stuff on Facebook, right?
Yep.
I'll often see that as it is. I don't feel like I need to add anything to it, especially if things since adding a white voice to something that might be a black voice might be seen
Ken,
as, me trying to, right?
Then I will challenge or ask, do you, in those situations where you share things, make sure to, one, click through and read that it is fully, or in the situations where you just have, say, a picture or image addressing something you agree with, when you just share it without any commentary, do you believe that when you're sharing it, it encapsulates absolutely every aspect of what you think at face value?
So I had an issue 2 months ago. I think I mentioned in the show actually. I shared an image that I found that I agreed with, where this guy said something very sensible, right? Something very sensible. I can't remember what it was. Something that I agreed with on face value of what was said and the words that were said in the tweet. But the tweet that I shared also had, the guy's name attached to it. I had no idea who this guy was. I didn't particularly care. He said something that I agree with, and that was fine. Again, I think it was something BLM, or I think it was something to do with the riots.
I believe I recall exactly the post, but yes.
Yeah. And I found out by a couple of friends who messaged me saying, "Hey, that guy has just been outed as like a sex, like either a rapist or a pedophile or something," right?
Yeah.
I had no idea. To me, it was just a guy on Twitter, somebody I trusted and followed had shared it, and I shared it because it was on face value. It was a good quote. And I mean, I suppose if you think about the way that current social media is, what do you mean when you share something, right? Is that endorsement? I don't think it always is. I mean, like, I often will sometimes, well, not always, but I'll sometimes share something like that I think is ridiculous. If somebody says something that's just mad, sometimes I'll share it because I'm like, look at this idiot, right? Or how dumb is this?
Now, do you credit Sir to say, look at this idiot?
That's what I was just going to ask.
If it is something that I know I don't agree with, I'll add a tag to it, like I can't believe this guy would say it or something, or this is inherently ethically apprehensive or something, right?
Yep.
I would say something along those lines. But I suppose if I do agree with it, I'm less likely to do that, and I'm also less likely to go and look it up and check the person and make sure that they're
now. See, that's
all the clean record.
I would say that's the trap you fall into. Because, and the reason I say this in general, especially if it's something you're motivated by as a movement or an idea you think is important for people to pay attention to, maybe it's my own personal interaction with social media, especially because of how divisive things have been lately. But unless a person gives me their own personal twist on why what they're sharing is important to them or makes sense, I am much more likely to discount it almost completely out of thing. Because to me, that makes people more, and I term to be, may make people unhappy to hear, but in a way, what people say about being sheep is that if all a person does is just share something blindly, meaning you're not giving me a context, then I'm going to discredit what it is in a lot of ways. It may be very enlightening, but at the same time, unless you give me some personal take on it for you, you're just someone passing on, in my opinion, dribble from other people. I've often muted that because, especially with people who are doing very divisive things I disagree with, I won't take the time to really get into and read that unless you tell me why you, as an individual, thought this was important. And in the same level of those reviews, that's what I would argue.
Yeah, Babs in the chat sort of hit it. The context of why it's shared matters.
Yes, that's true.
Most people assume by default that sharing is an endorsement.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
And I have to admit, earlier on when I had a Twitter account, I would look at people's profiles and say retweets do not constitute endorsement, and sort of chuckle to myself. It's like, well, number one, what a silly thing to post. Number two, why are you so important or pretentious to say that your endorsement of anything matters?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it
So
does matter. Everybody's endorsement matters to some extent. I
Well,
mean, because
I
people will
may
listen to you,
trust
right?
you as an individual, but that's where I
sure.
would hope that my trust of you as an individual, you would take the time to treat me in a, I guess, respectful way as an audience member to say why what you're providing is meaningful. And so, and
Sure.
Well, let's put it this way: I don't think it's necessarily saying that that person is worth or not worth our time. What if it's like your brother or your father or your cousin that shares something on Facebook or shares something on Twitter and they have a tagline on their Twitter saying like sharing is not endorsement. I think that's completely reasonable because
well, you
then
say that, but there's
the
also,
problem is you hope people would read that, right?
well,
And I
it's,
don't think that line in a Twitter profile is going to stop any of the crowd who are more than willing to pillory somebody over an unfortunate tweet from
yep.
For
pillaring
sure.
somebody over a retweet.
Well, so
And what I
in,
want to throw out there is the extreme case. What if Alex Jones said something you agree with?
Well, there's okay. What's that old quote by Hitler? There's a few quotes by Hitler that are like fantastic and out of context. You're like, wow. Like if you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. That's some good advice. You know what? That's some really good advice that we should all adhere to and think about and meditate upon. The fact that Hitler said it obviously means you don't want to quote it and retweet it or whatever. And in this modern day, if Hitler had a Twitter, you probably wouldn't be retweeting him, right?
I'm making that the tagline on my new Twitter account.
well, but an example being when the U.S. president currently retweeted, because there are several examples of retweets that have caused some controversy, the video of a person out of
Yeah.
Florida in a retirement area screaming, essentially racist things. And as the
White power, right?
president, yeah. And as the president saying, like, oh, I didn't read it. It didn't matter. We'll just take it down. No big deal. But it throws out there that obviously something about that tweet was meaningful to the president in order to retweet it. And even if you do agree that his intention wasn't to press something about someone being racist, that shows the risk, right, of not taking the time to comment about why it is or what it is you're putting out there for the context.
I mean, the
Because
guy
it
has
takes,
staff for that. I mean, there's normally there's very little excuse for somebody like me, where I have the capacity to understand and do the research. So why don't I? It's laziness, right? That's the only excuse I have is whenever I share something that shouldn't is laziness.
People do all
He
the time.
does not have an excuse like that because he's the goddamn president of
Well,
the United States, and he has a team who I imagine are probably going through
anecdotally,
filtered.
no, anecdotally, it's been stated that he is the one who tweets and that his team is not,
Oh, I
because
know.
I've actually seen representation where they tried to get that tweet pulled down faster, but he was out on the golf course and so they couldn't because he had he had his
If
phone.
if you choose to stand up in court for yourself and not hire a lawyer, you can't then say, "Oh well, I only lost the case because I didn't have a lawyer." you know?
Well, and I will say,
so true. I will say this. At least he did it from the Donald J. Trump Twitter
versus the
account and
U.S.
not
president one.
the POTUS Twitter account. So at least the POTUS Twitter account is reasonably clean.
Of course, all of it goes into the National Archive, but hey. The other thing that I'll put out that in general, this is
regardless of where it went the source.
Yeah, that's what I say. It all goes in National Archive because anything he does. But along those same lines, for me, when you back to what Todd you said about attribution, like just because I retweeted it doesn't mean I agree. The endorsement piece, it's the same kind of logic I see of somebody posting something on social media that's open for all and saying, "I'm just putting it out there. Don't comment on this."
Oh, that's douchey.
Or
douchey.
Only comment positive things. Because that's me saying, if you put this on social media for the world to see, by default, my opinion is you have opened it up for criticism and for commentary by people who see it.
Privacy settings exist, right? Like, do what you want, man. Like, if you put on your Instagram, I only want positive things on my Instagram, and that's fine. Just restrict your followers. Block people that aren't following what you want or doing what you would like to see. Fine, I don't care. But if you do it on a public forum, truly public, then you're just an idiot, right?
Well, but I'm just saying, then you are opening yourself up to the consequences. So getting back to the kind of the topic as framing some of this issue and why it may be exasperated in today's society about how things are done. It sounds like, in a way, review bombing and it coming up in that term seems to be done. That's mostly done in a way that is negative in some format or activist in some format versus what could be potentially a positive use of kind of what in live streaming, doing a raid or something on another channel, which is take all your viewers from one side and support something else. Unfortunately, on review bombing, it seems like you don't get the positive.
The other thing that we can't say, sorry, Wayne. The other thing that we can't say is we don't know that the V board on 4chan decided that because Abby looks like a dude that they went and crapped on that they didn't just decide to crap on the game, right? Now, if we use the 10% or the 110% rule that says if you have an online forum, 10% of the forum's users are active and 1% or 1% or 10% of the forum's users are passive and 1% of the forum's users are active, and we apply that the 30,000 negative reviews for Last of Us 2 are a review bomb, and that review bomb came from 4chan, that means that 4chan has like 3 million VBoard users.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I don't know if I believe that or not.
I think Reddit, 4chan, and most forums, even back to FARC, back in those days, I think the vast majority of them are passive.
Yeah,
like the stat said. Yeah, I think 4chan must have millions of users to be as popular and well known as it is.
Well, it's become the bad guy for anything pop culture when something doesn't go the way the enthusiast media would like it to go.
It's a combination.
It's go for many things.
Yeah, it's 4chan and 4chan and K-pop, right? Those are the two.
Mysterious hacker 4chan, yeah.
No, it's
right. Known as 4chan.
Oh gosh, so bad of this.
I will say this: I think politically motivated review bombing is wrong. I think a bunch of customers coming out and saying that a particular piece of media is not very good, in spite of what critics in air quotes say, is perfectly acceptable. And I don't necessarily know how you'd sift out one from the other. So I think probably the thing to do is to do something similar to what Metacritic did. What Metacritic did with Ghost of Tsushima, to tie this off to the other game that we talked about last week.
Yep.
And put a moratorium on user reviews for 36, 24, 48, 72 hours. Something I could be convinced of what the time frame looks like. Something else that I had in mind as a possible mitigator to review bombing would be your reviews are not seen publicly until you give a review that's not either a 10 or a 0. You can't keep universal praise on something. You can't universally crap on something. Once you give like a 7, right?
Interesting.
Let's say you're a fresh-faced 16-year-old and you've decided you want to start reviewing media, and you watch Men in the High Castle and you think it's garbage, right? And you give it a 0 review. I don't like this. It hits too close to home, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that review doesn't show up. Then let's say you reviewed The Handmaid's Tale and you did the same thing. I think this hits too close to home. I don't think we should, the fact that a series has been made out of it glorifies it, so on and so forth. Enter buzzwords here. And you give that a 0. That doesn't show up in the reviews. And then you review something like Batwoman and you go, this is exactly the kind of media that all media should be. Enter buzzwords here, so on and so forth, and you give that a 10. That review doesn't show up. And then finally, you review something like The Expanse. And you give a full-throated review. These parts are problematic. I like these parts. It's 6, right? As soon as that 6 hit, then they all show up. So at least you have a history of reviewing things, right? So one of the things there ended up being a counter review bomb or an attempted counter review bomb for Ghost of Tsushima, where and you went through, and I would say probably, because it was only like 300 negative reviews, so I actually did click 40 or 50 of them. And I would say on probably 30 of those 40 or 50, the people who had reviewed Ghost of Tsushima and left a 0 review had only reviewed 2 games. Last of Us 2 and Ghost.
Right.
They gave Last of Us 2 a 10,
ridiculous.
Ghost is... Right?
So there's actually an interesting psychological phenomenon that's been studied a lot, and I googled it to make sure I wasn't just remembering this badly. But there's actually been a lot of review systems over the years online that have been studied by psychologists from various universities because they're quite fascinating. You'll remember the YouTube, when it originally came out, was originally a like-dislike system, and one of the reasons they changed it. Sorry, I said that the wrong way around. It was originally a star-based system. Right? You could actually say like 5-star, 1-star, 1.5 star. And the reason they changed it is because they found something like 80 to 85% of all users were giving it 1-star or 5-star. Right?
Yep.
So
versus something
in
the middle.
Point in a star-based system if it's not going to be used? Same if you look at Amazon, if you look at anywhere, same as what Todd was saying. You mostly see the very polarized versions.
Well, you say that, but actually you brought up
buddies back in Scotland, we had this coffee review spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
And we're all academics, so we're all like educated individuals who understand, the statistics behind how the spreadsheet works and everything. But even then, even though we are a bunch of educated people who should technically know better than just to either go 1 or 10 out of 10, we found that most people stuck with certain numbers. Ours was slightly better, though. We always did 1s, 3s, 5s, 7s, and 8s. And there was it was interesting. If you actually looked at the number, you did like a line graph of the frequency of each of us doing these ratings, those specific numbers were always the ones that really popped out for some reason. 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8. There's something in human psychology where we think 10 is this, when it's such a big system, a 10 is like this holy grail. So most people will hit like 8 or 9, and when you say something's bad, that's a 1, because we're really bad at differentiating between how bad something can be. If you drink one coffee that's bad and another coffee that's bad, how do you tell them apart? You really can't, right? You just see them as, you just put a blank that was not enjoyable. And I think we do the exact same thing with video games. We're very yes or no, and I think it's a fault it's a laziness in our conscious mind. The fact that we choose to, instead of thinking about the various elements and, doing what our reviewer should do, which is say, okay, the graphics, what did I think of the graphics? Well, it wasn't my art style, but you can tell that there was a good theme and You can say that about pretty much any game, right? Even if you don't like the graphics, you can argue that they clearly stuck to a theme, or you can see where they were trying to go with it or something. You can find something good to say about anything. And that's the key about being a good reviewer. If you really say something's all good or all bad, you probably aren't actually thinking and engaging your brain, right?
So interesting, Ken, and that leads me to some potential answers for the question out there of how could you potentially mitigate the impact of review bombing or even the opportunity for it to happen. When you mentioned Amazon reviews, one of the things that struck me and something I actually like about Amazon reviews, because I disagree in the sense that you only see 5s or 1s kind of thing, because I see a lot of 4s, 3s, and stuff like that on a lot of products I look at. And they still struggle from that issue of people that seem to just, almost like the bots who come into a certain product to bump up its reviews so that they can sell this product from this company versus this other company with the same product. That I like the idea of, personally, what is it? Not accredited accounts or something, but one that basically says you have to have purchased said item before you can review it, like in their records. And so on Amazon, that it has like I think it's verified that the person, like the
Yes.
verified reviews can be filtered and put to the top, meaning on Amazon's record, you purchased this item and received it before you reviewed it. I think a similar thing can be done, and it may happen to some levels through Steam, in the sense that they can actively say someone purchased this on Steam before allowing a review to happen. Unfortunately, reviews live outside of this ecosystem, but I think it would be something that you could do. And the way Steam works and the way so many programs have so much access into knowledge of what we do with our gaming, I would even add a caveat on there that says cannot be reviewed or a review will not be shown until you've spent at least an hour in game or some time frame, right, in game, before you can do a positive or negative review. Or like you could write it up, but I would love for it to come up and say, this will not be visible to others until you have put an hour of game time in. Because that way, even people who right off the bat say I love or right off the bat say I hate, instead of going 5 minutes in and saying I hate it, delete, would have to, if they truly want that review to be seen, invest another 55 minutes into the game, or at least put it up on their screen or something. Because that at least gives you the sense of, I hate it so much, I will at least keep it on for an hour before I get this review out. And it would help mitigate the bots.
What about those who rent games or borrow it from a friend or that kind of thing?
Yep. Well, in a case like borrow, I don't know if you can do. Rent, and again, if it's a digital media in some format that we can track that you acquired, I think you can still do that, or put that kind of restriction on reviews. Because I think what we're saying is that there might be a risk, positive or negative, to allow people to just start putting out reviews in any format. They could be copy paste, their own whatever, without some kind of verification to, did this person even partake of whatever it is they're reviewing? Or are they just jumping on the train of other people doing that?
You're right. I asked that in kind of devil's advocate, because I don't really care if a very small percentage slip through the cracks, if we can make sure the review system is actually mostly secure and actually worthwhile, right? I think that's a better system. Yeah. I do agree with you.
I think all of us are spitballing ideas, because it seems like we agree that the concept of a large number of people suddenly putting a review out that isn't truly their own personal discussion of a product, a game, an experience, whatever it might be, is problematic. Because people will see, imagine the Metacritic scores, right? When all of a sudden something gets that Metacritic score of a 1 or something, like super low, that everyone's like, oh, snap, because enough people go to those review systems to try to make that judgment call of, should I spend money and time, whatever my resources are, on experiencing this thing or not?
Sure. So you've touched on what I think is the other side of this, and the narratives that get spun out of the delta between the critic review score on Metacritic and the user review score on Metacritic, right? And so the people who want to be able to tell you what you should and shouldn't consume have a very different idea of what you should and shouldn't consume from the people that are actually consuming the media as non-media members. So what we talked about before the show, and what I think is a really, really good idea, is we have a whole slew of industries out there that are very highly standardized, right? One example is the oil and gas industry. Like, you can't do anything in the oil and gas industry without running into a international standards document that tells you what valves and piping and
so damn well should be, right? We all think that's a good thing.
Sure. What it does lead to is, I can tell you one of the downsides to it. What it does lead to is a massive amount of over specification.
Yes.
In which you have standards documents from different sources that either one is more stringent than the other on what the requirements are, or they work they're opposite to each other. So one says to do one thing and one says to do the opposite thing. And how do you reconcile those? So that's a potential. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm not saying that the oil and gas industry shouldn't have standards. It obviously should. There's a huge conversation to be had about requirements quality. That's a technical engineering discussion that we don't need to have. My point simply was that we have industries out there that are very highly standardized or have a lot of standards associated with them. Why don't we do that for enthusiast media? Here is your game scoring rubric. Here's your film scoring rubric. And everybody uses the same scoring rubric. And you tick the boxes and you add up the points, and at the end you get an answer if you've got to use points. Or you could do what I've been advocating for years now. The enthusiast media has one job to do: buy or don't buy. And that's it. That is it. Should I buy Ghost of Tsushima? Should I not buy Ghost of Tsushima? Should I buy The Last of Us Part 2? Should I not buy The Last of Us Part 2? Should I buy Hellgate London? Should I not?
You know, personalized version. Looks through like maybe like a machine learning solution that you can create a profile on a website. There's no human behind it. It just looks at the games you've played, the review systems in place, and it uses all this data to work out what game you're likely to enjoy and which ones you aren't, of ones that are coming out based on maybe just tags and based on other reviews. That would be neat. That must exist already, right? That must exist somewhere.
Maybe it very well might. I like that idea because, again, I would never play a point-and-click adventure game. It's not to say that I don't think they should ever be made for anybody. It's just they're not my jam. I don't like them. And so if I had my choice, I would not play them. If I was forced to review one, my response to that would always be not buy because I don't find them compelling at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm one person to review a point-and-click adventure game. So yeah, I'm with you, Ken. Like if I put my genre preferences and my mechanics preferences and my graphical preferences and my sound preferences and my story preferences, even under story preferences, if you really wanted to make it political about representation, like you could do that, and then you could get a set of buy recommendations based off of an algorithm as you buy these games and they have what you're looking for. Yeah, I love that idea. I love that idea. Can we make that happen?
TM, we copyright it.
Yep.
This is proof. This is proof of copyright.
Dang, that's our idea first. Patent.
There you go.
It must already exist.
I'm gonna lift the leg and make sure that nobody else takes it.
Nice.
That's how that works. That's how that works, right?
Yeah, you mark it. Mine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, already exists. A machine learning item recommendation system for video games. It was originally a paper in Archive, so it's not actually a journal or anything, but it's still published by Bertens et al. In, it doesn't say the year.
How long ago was it?
2018, 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Basically, it says video game players generate huge amounts of data as everything they do within a game is recorded. In particular, among all the stored actions and behaviors, there is information on the in-game purchases of virtual products. Such information is of critical importance in modern free-to-play titles where gamers can select or buy a profusion of items during the game in order to progress and fully enjoy their experience. To try and maximize these kind of purchases, one can use a recommendation system. So this is a recommendation system for the in-game machine learn. It's a machine learning system to check what you would buy in game and then recommend other stuff that you can buy in game based.
Well, of course, it's all about advert, right? And therefore, getting someone to spend more money.
So
see, that's not being used for review.
Money, right? Why can't they just do this? Why can't they do this for products and like, instead of showing me sucky 15-second B-roll or a sucky 15-second advert roll at the beginning of every one of my YouTube videos? Why can't they use that? Why can't they use that algorithm and show me, hey, here's a list of things that you probably want to check out in future searches on YouTube?
Because we all opt out of that so that they can't track my specific usage, so they can't target me.
They're always like, "Hey, you love Factorio, right?"
Oh, by the way, Wayne. Again, not to make things political, but I'm gonna. So too bad. I want to make the biggest deal in the history of business, and use nationalizing social media as the threat in order to get it.
Okay.
And the deal is this. Google, Facebook, Twitter. You're going to take a bath on all of your advertising because you have massively underpaid for the data from all of the people that you've been mining for all this time.
But we all agreed.
Your all monopolies, whether we agreed to or not, we had no idea. Right?
It's in their TOS.
The uneducated, non-lawyer people, yeah.
We had no idea at the time. This is the deal that Congress should have made with television back in the day and screwed up. When Congress gave away the airwaves for basically nothing and allowed everybody to advertise and said you had to do, like, the deal back then was you had to do an hour of informational broadcasting a day. But they didn't put the rider on it that says you can't make any money during informational broadcasting. Right? Changes everything. So here's the deal. We know you're a monopoly. We know you've made ungodly amounts of money based on the data of all the people that you've been mining since the internet, since your websites were all a thing. The people are going to get compensated for that money, for that. And we're going to come up with an absurd number that you will not be able to afford. Even if the Chinese government backs you, Facebook. Or we're gonna nationalize social media. Your choice.
I can't imagine a nationalization of social media. What would it look like?
It would be
MySpace.
It would be exactly as it is now, but everybody would have to defend the First Amendment. Like, there would be no unpersoning any.
Well,
no, that's it. That's
one of the challenges. I mean, it's an interesting prospect. For me, the biggest challenge, right, is that the discussion about who owns what when it comes to a international perspective, because that whole thing we still see fights about constantly online about, be it trade and just information processing of stuff. What laws we make in the United States versus how the rest of the world either says,
Sure.
"Oh yeah, we'll apply to that too," or yeah.
I'm not saying it's not a crap storm, but the idea is the people get a cut of that check.
Well, and
right? So the digital advertising check that Google and Facebook monopolize 80% of, so there's no money for any content creators anywhere.
Yep.
Like, all of that money, or most of that 80% ends up going back to the people.
In some form, I agree, and would love to see that, because the challenge I run into, because especially United States, all of the hubris around capitalism and the idea of it being such a almost religious experience in the United States and fever, that all you're going to get is a bunch of people screaming how you can't do something like that because it stifles the ability for rich people to get richer. And
blah, blah, blah.
I know. We can have all kinds of discussions about whether that's valuable or not from a societal perspective, but it's something that has led us to where we are, in the same way that you have companies like Disney and stuff that own rights that far extend past the original content creators' lifespans and stuff like that, that people are going to scream that you can't put that hitch on it, that's potentially overregulation, that it's all of those kind of things. Sure. Even though I would argue in a way what you're saying, yes, not quite to the extreme of eat the rich, but the idea that, well, it's the same thing that these deals were made. Remember back before Kenner effed it up in the mid 90s, how the deal they had made for all merchandising for Star Wars, right? Yeah. The original merchandising deal was, as long as they cut a $50,000 check to Lucas every year, they got all the rest. And they maintained that until someone forgot to send a check in the late 90s, right before essentially episode 1 came out, to Lucas. And when they didn't sign the check for $50,000 after all the money they had made off of Star Wars, they lost their forever deal. And in doing so, basically Lucas was finally able to get the merchandising rights back and then recontest it and get real money back from their toys. Prior to that late 90s, Kenner made every penny except for that $50,000 off of everything that was licensed Star Wars. So
Sure.
those kind of deals exist all over the place. And unfortunately, that's why I've argued about net neutrality for so long. The problem is these tech companies are seeing way further than the average citizen or person can see what's going to happen with the amount of data they're going to start consuming. And they're building into the structure ways for them to make money tomorrow. We're seeing is, oh, they're doing stuff that won't affect us today. It's no big deal. Wait, but when they're making tiered internet, they realize everyone's going to be watching their content over the internet. Nobody's going to have a dedicated cable connection just for shows in the future. It's all going to be network traffic. And they're setting it up today to make more money off of you based on that network traffic than most people are aware of. It's another example where, yeah, unfortunately, these deals have happened. Now, I agree. I would love to find ways that we could go back and say, life has changed. We need to renegotiate this contract. And I don't know how that makes. I'd love to find a way, like you're saying, Todd, suggesting of strong-arming these groups through some kind of legislation. But then you have all the people who are like, but no regulations.
If you're not going to find people with the courage to take the antitrust route, right, which is what they did with the Foyne Company and the railroads and oil, like 120 years ago, right? Actually, the Bell was broken up, in the 80s? Yeah, I guess. So there was an antitrust case in the 80s where
it's the classic anti-monopoly.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? So you run this thing on antitrust grounds, and I guess you give them three choices. One, Google, we're breaking every single one of your functionalities off into a separate company, and you're all going to compete against each other.
Everything that is something .google.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Which by the way, I checked real quick. Reviews.google.com doesn't exist.
Oh, that's good. Number two, we're gonna nationalize it all. And so it's all going to fall under the proceeds of the federal government, and then the people are going to get all that ad revenue through Uncle Sam, which, by the way, balances the budget almost.
Yep.
Or number three, you're going to give that money back to the people directly, and everybody's going to get a cut of the check for all of the advertising revenue that you guys are keeping for yourselves. And you're going to have plenty of money. There's still going to be profit to be made, but you're not going to monopolize 80% of the ad revenue anymore. Like that, it's either going back to the people, or you're going to give a bigger chunk of the pie to the content creators. Those are the three choices. Pick one. We don't necessarily care, but we have some things that, that we want to see happen. And if you're not willing to play ball, we are going to throw the literal book at you. And we will win.
The sad part,
we're the federal government.
The sad part is I think honestly the only way that's going to happen is kind of what Babs is suggesting, saying that the EU is currently our antitrust watchdog. That's because terrible. In the United States, right, corporations aren't being checked at all, and you have even more people somehow been sold the idea that corporations should get all the rights of individuals, and we as people who don't see any of the benefits should roll over and accept it because the name of capitalism and the economy and all these buzzwords that really don't affect the average person. Just like the nonsensical comment that somehow a number in a stock market as a number of shares that are existing and value of S&P or whatever somehow translates to anything an everyday person working a 9-to-5 sees in their daily life. There is no connection. And so we unfortunately have that as a reality, but somehow everyday people who are the whole means to every country existing in the world, some kind of societal structure in this world exists at the behest of the everyday individual. And the biggest lie we've all been sold is that somehow the entities at the top that have put themselves in some position of power have any real power over us because we've just allowed and abdicated it or given it to them. And
abdicated is the right word. In part, I'll give everybody a recommendation. YouTube search Mark Blythe, Blyth.
That's right. You mentioned it before. Yeah.
Yep. YouTube Mark Blythe. Fascinating fascinating stuff. If you want an answer to the question of when the current socioeconomic status quo started, he's got data.
Nice.
And it's fascinating.
I do need to spend time and actually watch some of what he's got, because I'm very curious to hear some in-depth perspectives.
And he's Scottish, Ken, so you'll understand it perfectly.
Well, we have a history of being some of the best economists in the world.
Yep.
I think we've had like lots of proof to that we've talked about in the past of how many. I think we even brought up like some of the main things Scotland specifically had. It came in our discussion of British versus Scottish when we talked about like all the things where if it's good, it's British. If it's bad, but all the coming out of Scotland, then it's Scottish. We had that discussion way back.
That's how Britain tends to. That's how the English tend to say it. Yes.
Yes. I remember that conversation.
I thought in England it's Bruce, and Scottish it's Bruce.
Yeah.
No. But no, I think this is a thing to be aware of. If nothing else, if you're hearing from our conversation back and forth about where we stemmed it originally from just the idea that a bunch of people can jump on and provide some level of either up or down votes, reviews, something to any product, media, or something out there. We focused it initially off of gaming, but we kind of branched out to other places you see this happening. A cautionary awareness to our audience, to all of you out there, about taking, it's the old-fashioned grain of salt kind of discussion whenever you see reviews. And as Todd advocated, anything that's like constantly 5s versus anything that's constantly 0s or 1s, to take that with a grain of salt, that is likely someone that is either emotionally charged about some content or is not sometimes politically, other times financially, attached to certain things, thus to either hype or underrate something to draw it down for getting that cause across. Such that I know I try personally to look for those, as Todd was kind of saying, those 2 to 4 reviews, those people who have sides up and down on the subject. It continues in a greater scope. I'm now going to expand it again. When I talk about things politically, it is hard for me to listen to someone who only pushes a singular viewpoint, and it's not necessarily with their own content behind it. They just keep feeding the same kind of one direction or one view across the board. They're just like a regurgitation machine. I look for the people who show me their own personal attachment to whatever they're trying to put out there as an opinion. That is valuable to me, because you can game so many other aspects of the system. And so it's kind of a be aware. And I know, and thank you for the links I think Babs gave and some others about some of the specific things with, and actually Ken, you did too in our own chat about Amazon and how some of the data works, about how certain reviews can just get thrown. I make a point when I look at any product to read those reviews and to try to find the ones in between, as well as to look for the ones that aren't obvious copy pastes, to look at people's personal interactions with a product and people who post the images of them receiving the product and things like that help, at least for me, provide some of that vetting process of why I might trust one person's opinion and personal experience over something else that's in there. And it's kind of like what we've talked about, general advice for interacting with the world. This is one of those I would put out there as ways to better vet the opinions of others, and in this case, reviews. Hopefully that all made sense.
Did.
Yeah, totally.
Trying to change the world one listener at a time. But
yeah, you betcha. One topic at a time.
Right.
And we have all these great ideas, but it's a shame we have absolutely zero power in any government or any way to do this. We can talk about it though, and that's important.
I do share though.
Key to this.
I share that when I give this kind of advice, or when any of us do, about how to better navigate the things we all interact with around us, that is helping in some ways. If people are willing to listen and see what we're saying is somehow valid, please challenge us if it's not. If I give you some holistic, oh, look, you could do it this way, and your experience says, actually, that's garbage, that let us know. Email us. Let us chat with us. Go into VtWShowX@gmail.com and say, hey, I tried what you said, and it's crap, and here's why. Let us know, because I'd like to learn. But if it is valid, share it with others. Point them back to us saying, and if you don't want to be the one delivering it, but if you find some technique valuable in how you navigate today's world, share it. Because even if some people may come to different conclusions and therefore disagree with you, if they're using the same approach to deciding something's valuable or not, that's where I think it gets us as an entire society back on track with conversation and getting past just emotional responses to everything. And again, maybe I'm being idealistic.
You are, but it's refreshing.
I think it's a fascinating point of this discussion, actually, is the political elements we're talking about. And because my first reaction was, well, the political stuff really has nothing to do with it, and the review system should, if anything, like should be designed to not accept reviews that are clearly politically motivated. But the more that I think about it, what if a game is made specifically for that purpose? What if it's made to be like, I don't know, a pro or anti BLM or something, right? What if it's supposed to encourage discussion? What if it's an expression of free speech? Are we not allowed to rate it based on what story, what idea it's trying to sell? Surely we should be able to, right? I mean, surely that's important.
I think it depends on the kind of media. Which, not to spoil the content of what I think is coming from the email box, but I am one of the people who thinks you should rate a game on the things that make a game a game.
Well,
and not the things that games have, but are not necessarily things that turn a interactive movie into a game.
One of the things, Todd, I think that you had spoken about earlier about a system that could work to help people get value out of reviews that I don't think we really laid out as distinct or as specifically as we maybe could have, is essentially coming up with that agreed upon set of categories that all games should be reviewed upon. We've seen them in some groups. Rubric. Yeah, some people do it in certain organizations and groups do it where they'll say like gameplay, story, graphics, sound, whatever categories they have, and saying that each one of those can only get 5 out of 5 and your aggregate score may be 20 or 30 points, right? And rating each category in its own path, because then you would get those where the gameplay of Last of Us 2 maybe got a 3 out of 5 compared to some, but maybe for some the story got a 5 out of 5 and the graphics got a 5 out of 5, but the voice acting or audio presentation or whatever got a 4 out of 5, you know. But at least that would give you some point.
To be perfectly explicit, there should be a single scoring rubric that everybody in an enthusiast media use. So movies, television series, books, games, interactive movies, walking simulators, whatever. Subdivide it however you want to. I don't know that I have a dog in that fight, but I would help if somebody wanted to do it.
Yeah. I'd be more happy to.
And so you would go through the scoring rubric and you would say, yes, it has these things. Is it well made on a scale of, I don't know, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, whatever. Blah, 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 and you fill out the standard rubric form, and when you get done, you get an answer, and based on the answer, you would end up with your review saying, buy this game, or don't buy this game. And we do away with numbers entirely. Right? So that people like me, who will fixate on the fact that the review scores of one game are 11 points lower than the review scores of another game, or 11 points lower than the scores of another game, and I'm going to get fixated on that and think it's crap because I know that one game is better than the other and the wrong game has the higher score, right? Because I get fixated on that stuff.
The numbers are meaningless I agree for a single reviewer, right? A person's review of the numbers that they put in there, that's useless. It doesn't mean anything. But if everybody in an entire community says something's a 9 out of 10, then people in that community will likely agree it's a 9 out of 10, right? But if a reviewer says a 9 out of 10 for whichever reason, sound, music, whatever, it's pretty unlikely that, or it's not definitely likely that everybody else will.
Let's see.
Yeah. Yes and no. I'm one of those people who also likes to buck trends for the sake of bucking trends. So if everybody comes out and says and says, "Oh, I really love this thing," my automatic instinct is to be skeptical of it.
I get that. I'm the same. Yep. I
So
try not to be, but I am.
I don't even know if everybody's saying that the graphics of Game X are 9 out of 10. Game X, brought to you by ShowX. Graphics 9 out of 10. Gameplay 9 out of 10. Quote, plays just like Hellgate London, end quote. Todd Wolling, ShowX.
Wish they would remove the in-app purchases of facial hair customization.
That's right. Anyway, no. So my point being, even if engine, even if like 99% of the community said the graphics were phenomenal, like I would be the guy to sort of go in and look for the places where the graphics are wrong and say, see, the graphics are trash. I did the exact opposite thing with Fallout 76 not that long ago. Like, everybody was just bagging on the graphics of Fallout 76 because it looked just like Fallout 4. I thought the graphics in Fallout 4 were fine. So it looks like Fallout. It's set in West Virginia instead of in Connecticut, and it looked fine to me, right? So it was one of like the first. It was one of the first videos I put up on my YouTube channel. It's like, I like Fallout 76. Like, I didn't think it was necessarily a bad game at all. I was perfectly content running around exploring and building things, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, the trend was to crap on pretty much everything with Fallout 76. And I just like, I got to make this video to say, hey, by the way, I kind of liked it, even though everybody from Twitch to YouTube to the media at large was sort of lukewarm or worse about it. It's like, I don't think it's necessarily that bad. Is it worth $60? Maybe not, but your mileage may vary on that. If you've got $60 to burn, maybe.
For sure. So, I instantly have a point where I don't necessarily agree with other people straight away, and I do have a curiosity of like, oh, can I prove this is wrong? But that doesn't mean that I necessarily disagree with it either, right? I mean, I never played Fallout 76, so I can't really say anything about it. I can say that what I heard from others put me off entirely, and the fact that it looked like such a cash grab and an unfinished piece of work when it was released really put me off. I mean, I don't mind bugs, right? Like that's a requirement really for a new Skyrim or a new Fallout, right? You expect it to be Elder Scrolls or Fallout. You expect it to have bugs. That's fine because it's so open world is bound to have bugs, and that can only really be tested by the extreme bug testing that is being released.
I don't know if you know this, but Bethesda is an acronym, and the B stands for bugs.
Exactly, and so I'm okay with that. But what I'm not okay with is like unfinished gameplay. And from what I heard about 76, was that the first 30 levels were really exciting or something, and then the last 30 you were grinding because there was nothing left to do and they hadn't fleshed out. Like I'm not gonna put any money. I would play a free to play game that was like that. Like never mind dropping $60 for it. And regardless of graphics, regardless of anything else, I wouldn't. And again, the graphics I wouldn't care so much about in 76 because it's not supposed to be a graphically impressive game. It's an MMO. MMOs are never. Since when is an MMO required to be like the new Crisis 5? Like it's not. That's not the purpose of an MMO. It's like asking your chess game to have interesting, actionables that are different from the original chess game. It doesn't make sense.
No, if it doesn't have the complete catalog of Magnus Carlsen in it, then like I don't.
Yeah,
it's not 1 out of 10. Delete from hard drive immediately. Never play.
Oh man. So, wow. I do want to. Because we're going to get to the end of the show here real quick, and I appreciate as we've kind of talked about around this subject such, getting to some of our cleanup, if you will, from previous weeks.
Sure.
As we do have these emails coming in, and it might spark some more of what we've just been talking about. So I'm going to get in here and do the discussion and talk about the wall of text that was sent in here by our good friend Mog. Coming in here. So this coming in from Mog from Luna Rider saying, about Ghosts and The Last of Us 2. Says, hey guys, regarding spoilers, I do refer to things from both games, but at best, there's only minor spoilers. I do not go into specifics of either story, only about themes they contain. So that's a warning up front, but this is based on last week's show, everyone. So, comparing Ghosts to Last of Us 2 seems to me very misguided. Sure, they are both games you play on a console. They both released and they both contain some stealth elements. To me, that is where the comparison ends. One takes place in a post-apocalyptic world and is the continuation of a story about what it means to be human, selfishness, loss, and revenge. The other is set in old Japan and is the story of a man breaking with the tradition to save his home. In one, you play strong but physically weaker than the infected women. The stealth comes from the simple fact that if you attack head-on, you will not survive. When you are up against humans, you are heavily outnumbered, and again, stealth is a mechanism of survival. In Ghosts, you're stealthing to stop the enemies from killing their hostages, but if you choose, you can face them head-on. It's a choice, not a necessity. I attack a lot more head-on, and in hostage situations, you can even run to them and defend them if you like. There are very few instances where you have to stealth. In The Last of Us 2 is much more the opposite. To me, The Last of Us 2 is a survival horror game, and Ghosts is a tale of the shaping of a hero/legend. Both explore in such extreme violence is needed. But in Last of Us 2, you are squarely confronted with the gravity of your actions. In Ghost, you are confronted with displeasure of your uncle. But so far, Jin himself, the name of the player character, has been stoically accepting of the violence. In Last of Us 2, Ellie breaks down at one point over what she has done, and you are confronted more subtly several times on what you are doing. My point being, comparing the two seems pointless, as they are vastly different, attempting to impart different moods and different stories about very different people. I also think they are both very successful in what they are doing. I care a lot about the characters in The Last of Us 2 because I already cared about Ellie from the previous game, and the story does completely rely on the first game. What happens in it are directly due to the actions that occurred in the first. It is a true sequel, and while I'm not finished with the game yet, I'm stuck at the hospital basement, and if you know, you know, I foresee it ending tragically. Both the main characters are very human, and the responses to events are understandable, but also lead to so much destruction that the story/game takes seriously. It can't have an ending that is anything but a tragic one. The story does deeply matter, but not like in a David Cage game, the guy behind Heavy Rain, Two Souls, Detroit, and Becoming Human, where the story is influenced by what you do but continues regardless. You cannot change what happened in Last of Us 2, but the story is enforcing why you want to accomplish what you want, and makes you feel small and vulnerable despite having multiple firearms and a flamethrower. Continuing on, in Ghost, there's not such a deep story. I want to know what happens, but I'm not as heavily invested in the main character. Jin is a bit more of a blank slate you can project yourself on. And that is not a bad thing. I remember some of the devs talking about how the game is inspired by classic Japanese cinema, and think that soundly succeeded there. The game is gorgeous, uses film language where it does not interfere with the gameplay, such as camera angles, vignettes, lighting, and sound, in ways that feel cinematic instead of from a video game. The supporting characters feel like their own people with stories, quests, that are compelling, and makes you want to help them out. But if you play the game for the experience of being in the world, of engaging in combat, where The Last of Us 2 makes you feel scared and cautious, Ghost makes you feel like it is just a matter of finding the right angle and you will dominate the battlefield. And you do. Sure, as the core of them, the quests are repetitive because you're fighting off invaders, and because it is mostly open world, you can do most things in whatever order you like. Certain main events and progression to story has to take place before you can proceed to the next area, but you do not need to do all of the personal side quests first. You don't always even have to do that person's side quest in order, though they are labeled an example of like 2 of 9 and stuff like that. If you would like to do them in order, it encourages exploration, takes you where the wind, bird, or fox leads you. It is incredible in how it leads you into its world. A place somewhere between the rational and the mystical, a place that encourages reflection on the beauty around you. Continuing, I could probably go on for a long time as to how they differ, but I will not, as this is already far too much a wall of text. A bit, Mog, a bit. There are both really awesome games in their own right, and I am happy and for one, am happy to get to play both. Somewhat related, but not really. I will say that the hate that has been thrown down at Abby on the one of the two female leads from Last of Us 2, is very disappointing and makes me want to side with that game. It is the kind of misogyny that makes me want to not ever participate in the quote geek community online. It may seem harsh to come to some to call it that, but I don't know what else to call it when I have never heard a single similar discussion about how a male video game character looks. The people may not realize that misogyny is what they are participating in, but that it is completely how it seems or how it comes across and is experienced. And if someone were to have a reasonable argument, I cannot take it seriously because that whole part of the instantly escalated to the actress who portrayed her for getting harassed. That being the gal from Critical Role, right? I believe I heard a lot of personal attacks against her, even that spilled over from it. And she says the whole thing got very vicious. This happened before Ghost came out, but is still lingering in the back of my mind when talking about these two games side by side. And I cannot help but wonder if it is some of the underlying motivation for comparing the two as for how strongly it has all escalated on both sides. Regards from a new Storm Tamer, that coming from Miriam.
That was a very well-written overview, and thank you so much for sending that in, because I think having a perspective from, we're three dudes, right? I think having a female perspective is very important, and we can't provide that. So we very much welcome many of our listeners who are women or girls to or anything else in between to please email in and share their thoughts, because we're very much interested in hearing different perspectives.
Well, and that's true of any of this.
Especially when it comes to gender-based discussions.
Right? Yeah, no, it's true of any of our discussions. You see the three or hear the three of us talk about it and such. We absolutely encourage you guys to call us out or to at least provide even some of your own experience that may agree with, enhance what you've heard us say, but also disagree and cause us to maybe take some different help us inspect what it is we provided, because I think it's all very valid and we can only speak from our own experience.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit about the feminist side of things here? So
Ken, being our token gal,
I really hate the fact that these misogynistic a-holes have gone ahead and done this, because it belittles everybody in the discussion. Everybody. Not only obviously women, that's the core number one thing here, but I can't speak to that so much. I can highlight it and I can point out, and I have. But from my point of view, I feel like, for example, Todd here wanting to say that he didn't enjoy the game for reasons that are not misogynistic and are just based on his opinion on the game design and such. He pointed out what other people thought about the misogynistic side of stuff last week. But the fact that he just didn't enjoy the game generally is almost belittled by the fact that he's a dude because other dudes have been assholes about it, right? And I kind of hate that. Like, these misogynists have taken away from the male perspective here. They've taken away some of our ability to speak about this game without being also a male and therefore somewhat related to these guys who've done it. Just by being around them. And the fact that you're saying something that's bad about the game has this weird implicit grouping with them almost, which is not the case. Like, you were just saying you didn't like it for certain game characteristics that are relevant to game design as a video game connoisseur, right? And that's a completely legitimate thing. But these a-holes have come along and said that because how attractive or unattractive the actress is who the visual, I don't know what you name the visual elements that were taken from, like, the character design from the real world. I don't know how you call that. But their misogynistic opinions on that, on how attractive she is, as if that matter. She's not an object of you potentially dating. Like, what does that have to do with the game, man?
There have been some odd things I've seen where people do project onto the characters in game. I go always back to the classic. I tend to try to, actually what Mog said in the email about Ghost's character Jin, being able to project myself onto the character, and I tend to play a game as though if I was in that situation, how I would play. Sure. It's hard for me to role play in a game, oddly enough. I use the game as a way to project myself into those experiences. That I know people who often, I said it with MMOs, who choose primarily to do female characters, and the joke or comment often stated was, if I'm going to be looking at the rear end of a character so many hours of gameplay in a day, let it be something I can fantasize about, or something I can at least appreciate from that perspective. And jokingly say, "I
and
get you,"
sexuality
but
is part of human nature, right? But not every single thing in every single medium ever is about that, right? I mean, if you're
Well-
playing a dating simulator, there's going to be some element of attractiveness in the characters, male or female, right? And that's okay. If you're reading a romance novel or you're watching a rom-com, that all plays into it to some extent because it's relevant to some extent, right? You're putting yourself in the shoes of the characters and so on. But when it's a video game, and I'm sorry, is this character like underage as well? I don't know. I remember the first game that
I think she's older at
Ellie
this
is
point.
19. I think Abby's supposed to be around that age.
Right. So a 19-year-old girl who's in a post-apocalyptic environment isn't there for your physical pleasure. Right. This character is there to tell a story of tragedy and survival in a horrible existence, right? I don't understand why they think it's even vaguely relevant. Well, what kind of gamers do they call themselves? Where you think as that they can critique a game based on something so irrelevant? It's like trying to a game by how you think the food would taste in it. It's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with it. And frankly, it only is it. The difference is these are women, not objects, right? So it's not food. So it's freaking disgusting as well. It's misogynistic. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Miriam. I really appreciate you sending that in, and you're giving a voice to something that should absolutely said that um, this pushes away a huge number of gamers out there, which is the largest growing base of gamers, which is women. And it's so sad because I want our community to grow. I want there to be more gamers. I want to have more geeks out there we can hang out with and talk to, and in whose company we can enjoy and share our love of our hobby with. Why are these people pushing them away? I think they're disgusting, and I think they're just. And I can see why you feel like it's ruining it for you. I get that.
Well, the challenge is, and kind of on top of everything we've said, from what Todd gave us as perspective of the game last week to what Miriam gave us this time and things like that, is hopefully people can understand in general, not every game might be for you, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And perhaps focus more on what makes a game positive for you or aspects of what you enjoyed about a game. And if you do have criticisms about the game, try to make sure those criticisms are based on legit things like, hey, I did note this bug in this game made it unplayable, or something like this side quest cannot be completed. But to try to dismiss or fight against the game because an aspect of the story didn't jive with you is one thing. If that's the case, comment on that specific piece, not blast the entire game in its entirety because you disagreed with this one aspect. Like I will say, I currently have no desire to play either of the Last of Us game, both because they're primary console games and I don't do that, and secondarily because everything I've heard about the story and gameplay take it to something I don't necessarily care about, where I have such a laundry list of games that I would much rather prefer to play that I will spend my time in. If I want to play a game with a predominantly female protagonist in a gameplay mechanism I like, I will continue to play the newer Tomb Raider series that's been out because I think they're fantastic. And I love those games. And I think there's a positive portrayal across. But I mean, for me, it's about the gameplay, and those games I play the gameplay. And it's not because I want to do anything to Laura or
loving it.
Yeah. Right. So there's so many opportunities there. I guess I'm asking for better of our community as well. And at least the voices that listen us.
So a lot to unpack. Number one, harassing anybody that has anything to do with The Last of Us 2 is obviously wrong. Yep. And you shouldn't do it.
Well, if you're going to criticize her just about her portrayal of the character because of her specific voice acting, and we're just to portray or criticize the voice acting, that would be legitimate as a criticism.
Sure.
To attack the person
there's a far cry from saying
shite.
Ashley Johnson is not a good voice actor to saying Ashley Johnson is ugly.
Yes, that was very WTF differences.
So it was just a voice actress. It wasn't like a visual. I thought it was like a visual model of her in the game.
I don't know if they did. I'm not sure. They may have.
Okay.
There's something up with with Abby's model, but that's a matter of taste, really, and not anything else. I acknowledge everything that the Mistress of Giggles said in her email as real and legit, and all of that is correct and true, and I do not begrudge anybody their experience with any video game ever, and not even necessarily the way that they look at or interpret or experience what is happening. But almost nothing in that email had to do with the mechanics of either game, right? There's a lot about story. There's a lot about the characters. There's a lot about how the characters interact with the world. There was a little bit about the stealth mechanics. There's a little bit about the stealth mechanics in the two games. And here's what I want everybody to do. This is a thought experiment. Tell me what the story of Tic-Tac-Toe is. Tell me what the story of Candyland is.
Hey, Candyland is the precursor for the entire storyline of Adventure Time.
Is that real?
No.
Okay.
No,
and it's not like I watch Adventure Time. I don't know.
No, they're just candy people.
Tell me what the story of Solitaire is. Tell me what the story of No Limit Texas Hold'em is. Tell me what the story of Scrabble is. Now, all of those things are games, and Candyland, Mika Serrano maybe does have a story. I don't know. That game is designed specifically so that your 4-year-old child can win a game eventually, and not really designed for anything much more than that. But my point being is, when I look at the relative quality of games, I look at the things that make games games. And the point of providing all of those examples is that all of those things have things that make them games, and none of them have story associated with them. Now, we know that Tic-Tac-Toe is not a particularly compelling game because the mechanics are not particularly interesting, and if you know how to play Tic-Tac-Toe, you will never lose. Mathematically impossible if you play correctly. So, my point being is, there are things that make games games. That story may be the reason why you play a game. Story may be the reason why that makes a game better. No, not better. The story may be the reason why you shell out money for a game. Story may be the reason why you play a game multiple playthroughs. But to me, you cannot use story necessarily to say that one game is better than another. And that's simply what my point was, and I honestly don't care which game necessarily is better, except for the fact that we have award season coming up, and I just have this feeling, and ordinarily it wouldn't bother me, but in the same way that when Eurovision comes out and the best song doesn't win, I get annoyed.
Oh, that's all
by
politics.
Oh, we've got a lot of controversy here. In the chat, Shadow Vice says there are always stories, though. Stories always come first. Legend says, "Oh, yes, you can, absolutely." Unit Zero says, "Yes, you can."
Well,
I think
my step on that would be to say that, like any aspect of a game, and that's why I go back to when we were talking about the reviews having specific categories for things you judge upon, that you can compare aspects of the game. Gameplay may be something that certain people take as a primary concern, function, or aspect of why they would choose to play any game. But there are others who, and I've run into this a lot with people who, it's like conversation we've had in the past, Todd, about difficulty in games, setting different difficulties for what experience you want, about how if you play Doom on normal because you just want to see the pretty graphics and world, that's me adding my own take on it, versus playing it at a difficulty that makes it that I may fail at any stage in the game unless I perform well. those are different experiences people can choose to have to still experience the game. They may just have a different way it ties to them. And so with games with good stories, you may have something that honestly the gameplay is mediocre, but having that little bit of gameplay along with for them a compelling story being told that encourages, I don't know, discussions and exploration of specific subjects and plot lines and growth of characters and things like that to make them come away from after the gaming session feeling like they learned, enjoyed, empathized with characters and did something that you may not get from a technically superior gameplay game like Doom. You could still have a reason that is valid as a quality experience for that type person. And so that's where there's still a challenge there, and why with the awards situation, I say you have to have those very discrete categories. And you can choose whether or not to agree that Game of the Year means anything.
So I hear you. Generally speaking, it doesn't mean anything. I'm making a mountain out of nothing. I realize this. It's a character flaw. My question then is: if story is really what matters, why do we subdivide the way we do? Why are books different than TV shows, different than movies, different than video games? If they're not different, why don't we just collapse the whole thing together, call it narrative, and let everything compete against everything?
They kind of are. They clearly do have overlapping, like in the Venn diagram. They clearly have a lot of overlap, right? The mediums have strengths as well. I mean, like video games are better for being interactive, obviously. Reading is better because you can get inside somebody's head without it being obnoxious and annoying, like it might be in a film, for example. You can really describe feelings and thoughts in a book. And film and TV are good for showing social situations, I think, better than any other. Probably better than games as well, actually. But in the end, I think what Wayne said was right, though, is that story is not necessarily needed or not needed. I think it comes down to the fact that it's a facet of gameplay, and what makes it good is one of the things. You don't need it, just like Minecraft didn't need to be HD when it first came out. It was still a very good game and still broke records and still is to this day. Fortnite doesn't need to have some crazy story. Actually, it does have a crazy backstory, but it didn't really need it, right? I don't think like the story of Fortnite or the character development. I think each game, and depending on the type of game, depending on the genre, depending on the feel of it, it doesn't need to have certain aspects. Doesn't maybe that be those graphics, music, gameplay mechanics, whatever. One of the best games I've played, Walking Dead, right? Telltale Games. The mechanics in that game are almost nil. You just point and click. It's really simple, but the story is beautiful, and most people thoroughly enjoyed that game, even though it's barely marking what is a video game. It's more like a walk-through film. Right?
This is my point. I don't know that thing is a game. I'm not saying it doesn't have value. I'm not saying it shouldn't make money. I'm not saying everybody shouldn't go out and buy it. All I'm pointing to the fact is I can provide you a countably infinite number of examples of games that don't have any story at all. So if we're using story as a delineator of game quality, then we are losing out, missing out, rejecting, making light of, I'm not sure what the right word is, but plug in something along those lines. We are missing out on the thing that makes games. So I have a problem with. That little bit of vocabularic legerdemain I reject.
I will say, Todd, that for me the challenge is that it's much like, for my personal stake in it, is graphics. And we'll wrap things up here shortly, such that if this becomes a big enough compelling thing, we can talk specifically about it in one of our future shows here. Especially, I'm curious to hear our audience's reaction to thoughts on this, as we're getting a lot of good chat. But for me, like with graphics, it's the discussion of gameplay versus graphics, right? In the sense that you can make the same argument. Tic-Tac-Toe does not need HD graphics with 3 dimensions and stuff like that to make it a game you can play and perhaps enjoy. I would argue something a little more intensive gameplay than tic-tac-toe, but maybe chess or something like that has a history of being a game that's lasted throughout time from when you can track it being invented and still being played actively today. It's about the gameplay. However, on top of that, and I'll just use chess as a continuation of the example, me choosing to play one version of chess versus another, and thank you, Ionis, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. Battle chess. I would much rather play battle chess over, built-in old Mac OS chess 2D version that was there.
Yeah.
Because the graphics are compelling to me that make it a little bit more enjoyable playing the same game. And so I would say in some way what I'm getting to is that if you were to say across the board, all other things are equal in the sense of gameplay is solid, audio is solid, graphics is solid, but one game tells a better story or provides a better character that I could get behind versus another, that might be a thing that puts me over the edge on, if I were to compare the two, why that one's better. Now, I will agree, Todd, one of the big challenges, and I think what does apply directly to what you're bringing up, is when you start to compare games that are a little more dissimilar in whatever aspect of what they're playing, why some people might value that presentation of story, characters or something like that, or graphics in my case, higher than another game that you could probably argue from a technical perspective has more specific aspects to why it's good. I see it all the time from people like Tom Bad Guy about fighting games, and I think that's something, Todd, you can appreciate too. Fighting games as a distinct means to saying, win against this character in this situation, and its technical ability to execute moves in a competitive fighting type situation, where one game may be super technically accurate and wonderful, but another game that's also a fighting game may provide whiz-bang graphics or some animation or something that's a quirk that makes it more engaging to some audience members than others, where you'll have those hardcore fighting people that are like, no, this one is pixel accurate and the control scheme is so wonderful that I can always control my character in those exact moments, where that game, yes, it's whiz-bang fancy, but doesn't provide the strict good gameplay, right? And okay, that's a challenge.
Good points all around. I think this is time for the show.
We do have to call it
12 minutes over.
So with that, all right, everybody out there, please continue the discussion with us. You can talk to us on Reddit. You can email into the show at VtWShowX and things like that to let us hear, or VtWShowX@gmail.com, to let us know your thoughts on what we've been talking about. I love the discussion we've been seeing in the chat, and we want to keep it going. We are more than happy to bring this up in the future and kind of focus on some of these pieces to see where we get with the conversation. Sorry that I left it on my point with allowing Utah to rebuttal again and kind of reemphasize your piece. But with that, Ken, lead us out of here. I know you got places to be, and I appreciate all of you guys for getting in here and sharing this time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. You have listened to ShowX live on twitch.tv. Very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. And everybody, you can follow us on reddit.com/ShowX. You can support us on patreon.com/ShowX. You can follow us on twitter.com/DocDead, twitter.com/drkenreed, and twitter.com/ShowX for Mr. Wayne, for myself, and for the show itself as well. You can also check us on Facebook, search for Show Space X, and you'll find us there too. And that's pretty much most of the places, including the ones that Wayne mentioned as well. Thank you everybody for listening, and much appreciated. Thank you for the great conversation to both of you, and it's always great to hang out with you guys.
Absolutely. Todd, Ken, thank you both. Todd, anything you'd like to say as we get out of here?
Good participation in the chat, everybody. I more than realized that I am in the vast minority in this discussion. And I got weird thoughts about a lot of things, and so yeah,
it's a good thing. That's healthy.
We'll definitely revisit this topic, in which I will get spanked by the chat again, because I am a sucker. I'm a sucker for it.
Hey, that's all right, Todd. One of these shows we'll do a re-update on the whole concept of esports versus sports and really get things going.
Can we? Because I love being wrong about that.
I know that's one of those same kind of ones we've had the best. So thank you, everybody. We'll catch you again next. Sorry that I don't have the audio coming through on a dropson, so you're not going to get the zombie on this one because my server downstairs decided to disappear on me where all the audio files are had. But we'll get that again next week. So thank you, everybody. We'll catch you.